Zakai Zeigler with an ACL tear, done for the year. Just heartbreaking for that young man. Certainly hate to hear it, but I can't say that I'm completely surprised by when you see that non-contact injury and you see the response. So I imagine that Tennessee and Rick Barnes were already planning from that very moment of going forward this weekend and beyond without Zakai Zeigler. But prayers for that young man for sure.
Absolutely. As we talked about yesterday, it's just a horrible, horrible story. He's just a great guy. However much he might frustrate you on the court, there was never any doubt that he played with more heart on the court than anybody I've seen. I mean, the guy went 110, 115% all the time. To come from where he came from and be a 5'9" 3-star guard and work his way into the rotation as a freshman with 5 stars all over, and then become a starter his sophomore year, still with a lot of high-profile talent on this team. You can't say enough about that. And, you hate to see a guy like that suffer a ACL injury. But, again, he may need a year off to get fully better, but I still have faith in him when he comes back. I think he's a guy that I don't know if he has any NBA prospects, but he could have a great college career. And in the days of NIL, if you have a great college career, you can make some good money off it. I mean,
yeah, he's doing pretty well already. I can tell you that because we poked around and we're considering doing a podcast basketball version with him. So he's doing okay, like we do with Jacob Warren and Cooper Mays. They'll be up on the YouTube page today. So he's doing okay. But as far as the Vols, when I go back and look and I listened to Ron Slay talk yesterday, now that it is official, I think the thing they lose the most is the pep, the energy, that sort of thing. Do I think that he plays outside of himself at times? Yes, but I'd rather, a coach said to me one time, you'd rather say whoa than sick 'em. I'd rather say whoa than you got to work harder. And I don't think there was any question he gave it all on the court each and every night.
Right, not at all. I agree. There was no question on that. You're right. It's going to be tough to kind of replace the emotional leadership of him. I would say that I think Ron was right yesterday. I think Josiah Jordan-James is the guy you turn to. He was kind of the vocal leader before his injury this year anyway. He's not as emotional. Like, we're not talking – again, Zakai Zeigler reminded me of Juwan Jennings. Juwan Jennings was just like that vocal, emotional leader for Tennessee. And I saw that with Zakai, whereas Josiah, I think, is more almost an extension of the coach, if that makes sense. Josiah is an extension of Rick Barnes. But Zakai is the guy that, like, is going to ride you in practice and be like, he'll set the example because of how hard he goes, and you'll want to follow him.
No, he definitely, I think, is an extension of Rick Barnes. I think he's probably at the top of the list with playing defense first and not worrying about running and gunning is most important. I think there are probably other players that would like to run and gun a little bit more, but I think Zakai Zeigler, it suited his ability, what Rick Barnes wanted to do, which I'm sure is part of the reason he came to Tennessee. But let's face it, I mean, he's going to separate himself from other guards on defense, and he's probably not an up and down the court intimidating finishing presence. So he was a great extension. That's a good word to use. A great fit for Rick Barnes' system.
Correct. And also, if you saw what he did, if you could see what he did as a freshman and know that he's going to stay for a few years. Look, you and I have done our fair share of criticizing Rick Barnes this year. If there's one thing Rick Barnes does, though, if you look at players that have played for him, particularly 3-stars, they develop really well. Rick Barnes has turned a lot of 3-star prospects into NBA caliber prospects. Admiral Schofield is still in the NBA right now. We were talking, that guy was the ultimate tweener, a 6'6" power forward, really, if you think about it. And there's almost no room for a guy like that in the NBA nowadays. And he's not on a roster regularly, but he's still kind of flirting with rosters and things like that. And so it's not like teams have totally turned their back on him. That's Rick Barnes' development right there. And
it is. And also, I'm going to throw Grant Williams, who has more natural ability than I believe Admiral Schofield. And I like his game, Grant Williams, a lot more for different reasons. But at the same time, if you would have told me during his career at Tennessee that Grant Williams would be a second level NBA player, not holding on to a spot on the bench, not holding on to a roster spot, but instead, you've got your LeBrons of the world. You've got clearly the top 15, 20 guys in the world. And then there's a second level of 30, 40 guys. And he's part of that second level, in my opinion. Do you agree or disagree with that?
Oh, I absolutely agree. I've had fights with people about this all the time when it's funny. I got friends when we talk about college players over whether or not someone makes it in the NBA, and they always say a player, there will be those guys among that second level and say, oh, he was a bust. I'm like, if you're a second level NBA guy and you played 10 years in the NBA, you made a lot of money without really risking your body. Like, I would take being a second level NBA guy over being an NFL star outside of quarterback any day of the week.
How much nowadays that we're seeing the Brandon Miller incident. Now you have an incident at Georgia as well, off-field incidents that are very serious. How much of a factor, if you're an NBA scout or GM and you're drafting a player and you've got two guys close on your board and this guy played for Rick Barnes and the other dude didn't, how much are you weighing that? I'm weighing that quite a bit because those guys have developed. They worked hard. They work hard. They'll continue to work hard. That to me is a huge bonus when it comes draft time.
Absolutely. Particularly this day and age in the NBA, it's so hard. The NBA is the biggest crapshoot with executives and finding stars. I mean, it just is. I got to be honest. I don't think, there are very few instances where, it's, if you get players from the European leagues, you probably have a better idea where you can project, but you really can't project one and dones out of college unless they're a generational talent like Kevin Durant. It's borderline impossible. And so I think that does have a role. I think that does make an impact. And we know that there were players that, again, guys that I wouldn't had they played in other systems, they might have sniffed an NBA roster for a second and been off the roster, but they actually had somewhat of a career because they played for Rick Barnes for a little while. And again, not stars, but again, if you're a 3-star and you make it and you become a 10-year NBA player, that's a massive overachievement. Because again, I've said for a while, the NBA is the most elite league in the world talent-wise. When you talk about number of people who play the sport of basketball versus the roster spots available in the NBA.
So are you telling me Sam Bowie was misevaluated?
Actually, no. Michael Jordan was misevaluated.
No, I agree with that.